Hello everyone, I'm in the gallery again making more of my little constructions. Here's a little man I made, sticking his belly out and telling someone to stop or something. He looks sort of like the Officer Michael in the Make Way for Ducklings. Here's another person carrying balancing a long bar on his two hands, I guess, going up. Here's his head, and his legs are made by the sort of you have to use your imagination around me. And while you're using your imagination, imagine me looking like, a young Cary Grant. How about that? Do I want to look like him? I'd rather look like his boyfriend, Scott, whatever his first name was, Randolph Scott. Imagine that I look like Randolph Scott, except with the charm of Cary Grant. Judy, Judy, Judy. Anyway, this is my new best friend, this pen. You just saw me upload yesterday's nib placement. I still haven't gone through the actual measurements using the inner cap, and I realized that when I was filming, much of what I was doing was off screen, which wasn't necessarily helpful, was it? But it really would only make sense if you had X-ray vision anyway and saw what was happening inside of the pen. So I'll just explain it here a little bit using an illustration. Okay, where in my life is a piece of paper that I can write on? Thank you very much. Something smooth. How about this? This is all my cardboard I'm using, all my crappy cardboard, but this might work. So what you want when you're setting a nib and feed and section together, the play of the nib is here, the feed is here, longer, usually. Of course, now you can't see it because it's so light. Nib, feed, and section. Okay, so all of these things have, look at what I've just done. Look at what you made me do. It was their fault. It wasn't my fault, it was their fault. All of these things can be placed within each other, shoved further in, shoved further out. This feed could be further back, so it's sort of here, or it could be further forward, so it's there. Now, yes, there is a correct way to do it, but the correct way isn't always the right way. The right way, you might want your pen to have a wetter flow. You might want to have it have a drier flow. You might want to have it be slightly different in some way, shape, or form. So moving the feed slightly back and forth in the pen nib might improve it for your taste. I can just hear pen people screaming at their computers right now as they're even imagining that you can do this. But you can, because it's your pen and it's the way you write. So you can play with this. And then how these two things relate to each other and how they are fitted into this is also up to a little bit of play. We're not talking about feet or inches or centimeters. We're talking about millimeters or parts of millimeters. And someone could look at the pen and say, oh, that nib needs resetting. And yes, it might need resetting for it to look right and for it to write right. For 9/10 of the world's population, but you might be in that majority, but you might not be. You might want more ink flow. You might want less ink flow. So you might set these three things together a little bit differently. Now, the thing you have to worry about, and the thing that I haven't double-checked with this particular pen is, let's say I have my nib and my feed stuck in the section. And it sticks out this far. Let's call that distance X. I know you're looking at this sideways, but it's the way that you can do the math. You can do that in your head. The thing that you have to be very, very careful about in any pen tweaking that you might do is that there is an inner cap there should be an inner cap on almost every fountain pen. And what that is, if I do a cross-section of the cap, this cap is rounded like that on the top. Put the clip here so you know what we're doing. On pen caps, there's an inner cap which often holds the lever in place, or the clip in place. But that's not its most important function. Its function is to create an airtight and watertight and ink-tight seal. When the cap is screwed on correctly, this end of this thing will meet with this. The threads are down here. If this was a threaded pen, and the threads would be inside the cap here. So it would screw down until this edge met in contact with this, making this space that contains the nib and feed that sticks out of the pen would be within this cavity, which would be, when it's screwed on, airtight. That way your pen won't suddenly leak on your expensive shirt, or it won't dry out so that you won't be able to write with it as quickly as you like. So keep this in mind. This is a distance from that point of contact and the end of the cap. Now, some of the ends of the caps are squared off, some of them are rounded, so you have to keep that in mind. Most of them are kind of relatively squared off. So now let's go back to this thing. If this X distance sticks out is greater than this Y distance, then the cap, the point of the nib, will hit the top of the cap and it'll break, or get bent, or get twisted, or something when you're screwing the cap on, because this thing makes contact and you're still screwing, and that the poor little iridiums are being drilled into the back of your cap. That's not going to be good. So what you do when you're setting your nib, especially if you're setting a nib that might feel to stick out a little bit more than normal, you might it might stick out so much that it makes contact with the back of the cap. So you measure this, and you measure this. You take the nib out, and you screw the barrel into the cap as far as it will go until it's tight. And then you make a little marking. Let's pretend this was a screw cap. Let's say it screws. And you take a little, maybe a piece of tape. You put a piece of tape right there on the barrel so that you say, okay, now the cap, when it's screwed on tightly, goes all the way to this point. And you mark that with a pencil line or something you can rub off later, or a piece of tape. A little piece of masking tape would work perfectly right there. So you know that this goes all the way down. Then you take this out, and then you measure. You take a stick, a narrow stick. I should be doing this with my actual devices, but I don't have them down here. God damn it. You take a stick, a ruler. Now what I do is I take my little machinist ruler and I make contact with the side of the cap, and I shove it back until I hit the inner cap, until I hit this part right here. So now I know what this distance is, right? With me so far? From the end of this to the inner cap is this long. So that's Z, that's measure Z. And then you measure further in, you go all the way to the inside, and then you have two measurements on this stick. Okay, here's your cap again. And here's your stick that you shoved in there. And your stick should have, you have the first measurement, which shows, you have the first measurement shows the inner cap, which is from here to the inner cap. And the second one is from here to the end of the inner cap. Okay, so you've got these three measurements. Am I making any sense whatsoever? The important thing is you have this is the measurement you want. So you do the math with this thing. You can see where this belongs. And then if your pen sticks out from the end of the section that much, or preferably a little tiny bit less than that much, then you know that your nib is safe. So why do you need to know this distance? You don't really need to know the marking here. Do you need to know that? Maybe I need to know that. If this is a slip cap that doesn't have an inner cap, that's why I need to know that. If this was a Waterman 12 or some pen that doesn't have an inner cap, if this didn't have an inner cap, I would need to know this amount right here, because then I'd have to do a different kind of math. But I believe that this does have an inner cap. It's very slight. And that inner cap makes a contact with this. So I'm hoping that the nib that I've set the Schaefer nib that's in this pen, the Eversharp nib that's misspelled Schaefer, fits in this without hitting. But this is a pen that I probably would never carry outside with me. This would never be an EDC, because it's so lightweight, it almost feels like it's lighter than air. It seems like it could, if I just didn't pay attention for 1 millisecond, it could fly off and land on the ground. So it's a very weird feeling. It's very weird. And I need to have my friend Ted, as I said earlier, try this pen out. He won't like this nib very much, but if I beg him to pretend he likes it just for a few minutes, he'll come up with a really beautiful way to describe the personality of this pen. Mainly the nib, but I think he'd really like the pen as well, because it's just, the weight of the pen is just so different than you would expect it to be. Okay, back to my little, okay, stop. The video is too long, stop. Okay, bye.